The air in the formal dining room of our $15 million Silicon Valley glass estate smelled of white truffles and suffocating arrogance. It was our customary Sunday dinner, a ritual I had endured for 4 agonizing years. The reclaimed redwood table was set with imported Italian porcelain and baccarat crystal goblets that caught the ambient lighting from the vaulted ceilings overhead. From the outside, looking through the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the misty Santa Cruz Mountains, we were the pinnacle of modern tech elite society. We were the picture-perfect, affluent family that magazine covers obsessed over. But sitting at that table, gripping my heavy silver fork, I felt nothing but a toxic undercurrent that had been brewing since the day I married into the Sterling family. At the head of the table sat Beatrice, my 65-year-old mother-in-law. Beatrice was a terrifying fixture in the Bay Area high society charity circuits, always dressed in impeccable Chanel tweed, always judging those she deemed lacking the proper pedigree. Across from me sat my sister-in-law, Serafina, a 30-year-old lifestyle influencer dripping in Cartier bracelets she could not actually afford, and her husband, Vance, a 33-year-old venture capitalist who loved to boast about his latest angel investments over expensive scotch. The dinner had been an agonizing exercise in psychological warfare from the moment the first course was served. Beatrice had been dropping passive-aggressive comments about my background all evening. But to Beatrice, I was just a glorified IT technician who didn't know how to properly support a visionary genius like her son. I was quietly cutting a piece of my truffle-infused Wagyu beef when Beatrice suddenly slammed her crystal wineglass down onto the table. The sharp, piercing sound silenced the room. She turned her body fully toward me, her lifted face contorting with contempt. "You know, Elena," she began, her voice vibrating with a calculated, theatrical malice. "And what do? You sit there in your drab little gray suits, staring at computer screens in a dark office, contributing nothing to the legacy of this family." I slowly set my knife down on the porcelain plate. The room went dead silent. Even Vance stopped chewing his food, a smirk forming on his lips. Beatrice leaned forward, pointing her diamond-adorned finger directly across the table at my face. The heavy stones caught the light, flashing dangerously. "You are a parasite," she spat, the word hanging in the air, heavy and venomous. "You bring no value to this table. You are a leech, draining the greatness right out of him." I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. My training as a cyber auditor taught me to remain detached when faced with extreme hostility. I simply looked at her manicured finger and then looked at my husband, expecting him to intervene, expecting him to be the partner who defended his wife against such a vicious attack. Instead, Julian leaned back in his tufted leather dining chair and pulled out his sleek smartphone. He didn't look angry. He didn't look embarrassed by his mother's horrific behavior. He looked amused. He opened his camera app and pointed the lens right at my face. "Oh, let her speak her mind, mother," Julian laughed, his voice dripping with condescension. "Let the founders group chat, see how the charity case reacts when she gets called out on her laziness. Smile for the camera, Elena. Let everyone see the face of a woman who hit the ultimate Silicon Valley jackpot and still doesn't know how to act grateful." He was actually recording my humiliation to share with his fellow tech bro executives. The betrayal was so profound, so sickening, that it almost took my breath away. But I forced my lungs to expand and contract with slow, measured precision. I knew that showing any emotion, anger, hurt, or shock would only give them the sick satisfaction they were craving. That was when Serafina decided it was her turn to join the ambush. She tossed her expensive, highlighted hair over her shoulder and sneered at me across the centerpiece of imported white orchids. "Mother is right," Serafina said, her voice dripping with venom. "You really need to remember your place, Elena. If it weren't for Julian and his success, you would still be stuck in the foster care system, bouncing from one miserable group home to another. You would still be wearing hand-me-down clothes and eating government cheese." She laughed, a cruel, sharp sound that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "Let's be real," she continued. He put you in elite circles with venture capitalists, senators, and tech billionaires. And instead of dropping to your knees to worship him every single day, you just sit there acting like you actually belong here. I listened to every single toxic syllable spilling from her mouth. I processed the deep-seated classism, the unadulterated arrogance, and the pathetic delusion of her insults. They truly believed they were Silicon Valley royalty. They worshipped venture capital, funding, and social status above all else, and they believed Julian was the king who provided it all. Vance chuckled and raised his glass of expensive scotch. "Cheers to that," he muttered, taking a long sip. "You really did rescue her, bro. You're basically running a nonprofit for the underprivileged. You've got to teach me your charity tax write-off methods." The table erupted into laughter. Beatrice was smiling triumphantly, her chest puffed out with aristocratic pride. Julian was still holding his phone up, capturing every second of my silent, stony humiliation. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to confirm their narrative of the angry, ungrateful woman from the wrong side of the tracks. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I am a senior cyber intelligence auditor. I do not deal in emotions, tears, or screaming matches. I deal in encrypted ledgers, I deal in digital footprints, I deal in hard, undeniable, catastrophic facts, and the fact was, I knew a secret that would obliterate their existence. I knew a truth so explosive that it made their current arrogance look like the ultimate pathetic comedy. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't shed a single tear. I picked up my crystal water goblet and took a slow, deliberate sip. I carefully set the glass back down on the table, aligning it with the edge of my silver placemat. Then, I picked up my crisp white linen napkin and gently dabbed the corners of my mouth. I stood up from the table, moving with a slow, calculated grace. My chair scraped softly against the polished hardwood floor. I looked down at Beatrice, whose triumphant smile was beginning to falter just a fraction under my icy, unwavering stare, and finally, I looked straight into the camera lens of my husband's phone. "Thank you for dinner, Beatrice," I said, my voice smooth, cold, and devoid of emotion. The Wagyu was slightly overcooked, but the company was as toxic as I expected. Julian quickly lowered his phone, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, his voice hardening into a command. "We are not done talking to you. Sit back down. I'm going to get some rest, Julian," I replied, not even bothering to look back at him. It takes the amount of energy to carry the dead weight of this family. I turned my back on them and walked slowly out of the formal dining room. I heard the sharp intake of breath from Beatrice. I heard Julian scoff and mutter something to Vance about me being a hysterical, ungrateful psycho. I heard Serafina whisper that I was a coward who couldn't handle the truth. I let their voices fade into background noise as I climbed the grand floating glass staircase of the estate. I let them believe they had won. I let them bask in the sheer illusion of their wealth and superiority. Because as I walked down the long, gallery-lit hallway toward the guest wing, the edges of my mouth finally curled into a genuine, lethal smile. I wasn't retreating, I was preparing. They had just handed me the key to their own destruction. They had crossed the final boundary and severed the last remaining microscopic tie of loyalty I held for this fraudulent marriage. They thought they were untouchable in their $15 million Silicon Valley fortress. They thought Julian was the omnipotent provider who held all the power. But as I entered the guest suite and closed the catchy, soundproof door behind me, locking it with a satisfying mechanical click, my mind was already executing the final audit of their miserable lives. I walked over to my secure biometric briefcase and pulled out my encrypted laptop. I sat on the edge of the plush guest bed, listening to the heavy footsteps echoing down the hardwood hallway. It was Julian. He stopped right outside the master bedroom across the hall. He wanted me to feel displaced, punished, and small for disrespecting his mother. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a secure notification from him. I picked it up and read the text message. "Since you want to act like a disrespectful guest in my house, you can start paying for the privilege." My mother is right. I have carried you for 4 years. Starting on the first of the month, I expect $8,000 in rent. If you don't like it, you can pack your cheap bags and go back to a group home. I read the text twice. A soft, genuine laugh escaped my dread. He was so intoxicated by his own performance as a tech billionaire that he had actually begun to believe his own lies. He had spent so long playing the wealthy provider for his mother and sister that he forgot the actual legal paperwork he had signed 4 years ago. As a senior cyber auditor, I don't deal in feelings or shouting matches. When people yell and project arrogance, they are usually trying to distract you from what they are hiding. My career is built on tracking the digital footprint of money. I dismantle the financial illusions of powerful, arrogant men who think they are smarter than everyone else. Julian was just a smaller, infinitely less sophisticated version of the international criminals I put behind bars for a living. I opened my laptop and typed in the encrypted, 32-character password for my secure servers. The screen illuminated the dark guest room. I clicked on a file labeled Orion Holdings LLC. Let me tell you a story about my background in the foster care system. Serafina was right about one thing. I grew up with nothing. I was an orphan. I didn't just audit companies. I recovered billions in stolen assets for foreign governments and private institutions. My bounty commissions were astronomical. Wealth should be silent. Poverty and insecurity are loud. Julian and his family were deafening. Before Julian and I were even engaged, I was already quietly worth over $200 million. I didn't buy designer handbags or lease a luxury supercar to show off at tech conferences. I took that wealth and I invested it through a labyrinth of untraceable shell companies. I bought it in cash, outright, under the name Orion Holdings LLC, when Julian and I started planning our future together. His fragile ego couldn't handle the idea of moving into a house his wife owned. He was obsessed with portraying the image of the ultimate Silicon Valley founder, the self-made king who rescued his damsel from poverty. No bank was going to approve him for a $15 million mortgage. So, I offered him a compromise. I told him I found a private landlord and exclusive real estate investment company willing to lease us this beautiful estate with an option to buy later. I told him we could split the monthly costs, but he could be the primary leaseholder on paper to help build his portfolio. Julian jumped at the chance. For 4 years, Julian has been strutting around Silicon Valley, hosting lavish Sunday dinners and telling his mother, his sister, and his board of directors that he bought this $15 million mansion. He basked in their praise. He let Beatrice boast to her country club friends about her son, the real estate mogul. But the best part of this arrangement was the paperwork. Julian never bothered to read the fine print of the commercial lease agreement he signed. Julian was not the king of the castle, legally speaking. Julian was just a month-to-month tenant, and I was his landlord. I sat cross-legged on the plush guest bed, scrolling through the property deed and the digitally signed lease agreement. I took a high-resolution screenshot of the text message Julian had just sent me demanding rent for his house and saved it to a newly created, encrypted folder on my desktop. I named the folder Operation Eviction. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I opened a new secure browser window and logged into the state corporate registry to ensure Orion Holdings LLC was compliant and up to date. Next I opened a drafted document from my personal lawyer. Victoria, my closest friend and one of the most ruthless corporate attorneys in California, had drawn up these preliminary divorce papers a month ago. When I first suspected Julian was hiding financial troubles regarding his startup. I was going to financially annihilate the false reality he used to oppress me. I drafted a formal 30-day notice to vacate the premises. As the sole proprietor of the LLC, I had the legal right to terminate his month-to-month tenancy without cause. I would find the breach tomorrow when I hacked into his personal accounts. The blue glow of the screen reflected in my eyes. The anger that had been simmering in my chest all evening cooled into a sharp, icy, laser-focused resolve. Beatrice wanted to talk about parasites. She was about to find out what happens when the host organism decides to thoroughly sanitize its environment. I checked the time, it was past midnight, the glass house was dead quiet. I closed the LLC portal and stretched my neck, preparing to shut down the laptop and get a few hours of sleep before starting the deep dive into Julian's banking records. Just as my hand moved toward the power button, a sudden movement caught my eye. A shadow blocked the thin strip of light seeping in from the hallway under the guest room door. Someone was standing right outside. I froze, watching the bottom of the door. The floorboards creaked softly under a heavy weight. It was Julian. I waited for the sound of a knock or the rattle of the doorknob. It stopped right at the edge of the rug. The shadow retreated, and I heard Julian's footsteps padding away. Back to the master bedroom. I stared at the paper. For a long moment my pulse quickened slightly, not with fear but with anticipation. I slipped off the bed and walked silently across the room. I bent down and picked up the document. It was printed on thick, premium stock paper. The heading was printed in bold black letters. It read, Personal Asset Liquidation Authorization and Capital Guarantee. Beatrice demanded perfection and wealth from her children, so her children simply faked it. And when the venture capital money ran out, they decided to target the quiet, foster care girl, who they knew secretly had pristine credit and a healthy savings account. I didn't go to sleep. I opened my laptop back up and initiated a deep dive security breach into Aegis Health's internal servers. I was going to find out why Julian was desperate for $250,000 in the middle of the night. The download began. I pulled everything. I exported the Aston Martin lease agreements. I compiled a spreadsheet detailing every single transfer Julian made to Serafina and Vance to fund their fake influencer lifestyle. I backed up the evidence of Julian's staggering corporate margin debt and his fraudulent board reports. But then, I found the Holy Grail. Hidden deep in an encrypted offshore subfolder, I found the core data logs for Aegis Health. Julian wasn't building an AI healthcare startup. He was running an illegal data harvesting operation. He was stealing the private medical records of thousands of patients and selling them to the highest bidder on the dark web. And the lead engineer managing the illegal data transfers, Isabella Rossi, the 25-year-old AI ethicist who was currently driving a brand new Porsche purchased by Julian's corporate account. I encrypted the catastrophic package and sent it to three separate secure offshore servers. I also sent a duplicate file to Victoria with a single instruction attached: prepare the war room. Mr. Sterling actively watched me carefully from across his polished desk, clearly sensing the intense, dangerous tactical shift in my calm demeanor. Is everything all right, Miss Williams? He actively asked, his professional tone laced with a new profound level of deference. Everything is perfect, I actively replied, placing my cracked phone face down on the heavy mahogany desk. Mr. No one, under any conceivable circumstances whatsoever, is to know that I actively, legally hold these funds. I actively leaned closer to the shocked manager. Do you understand me clearly? Mr. Sterling nodded rapidly, actively typing with fierce focused urgency on his silent keyboard. Your daily, basic checking account will remain separate and unremarkable. Excellent, I actively said, leaning forward and actively resting my tired arms on the heavy desk, feeling the cool leather against my warm skin. Second, I want an immediate, unhindered, aggressive upgrade to your highest VIP wealth management division. I commanded, consider it done immediately, Miss Williams. Is there anything else you urgently require today? Yes, I actively said, my cold voice dropping to a dangerous, unwavering whisper. I actively stared directly into his wide eyes. Mr. Sterling actively swallowed, hard, nodding slowly with undeniable professional understanding. He actively reached for an heavy, exclusive leather Rolodex, sitting on his polished shelf, actively flipping through the premium, thick business cards until he found a specific, intimidating matte black card. He slid it carefully across the heavy desk toward me. The specific, powerful name printed in sharp, reflective silver lettering actively read, Attorney Harrison Caldwell. Attorney Harrison Caldwell is an undeniable living legend in the ruthless corporate sector. Mr. I actively picked up the matte black card, tracing the raised silver lettering with my stressed thumb. It was perfect. Darius truly thought he was a brilliant, untouchable financial genius for maliciously using my pristine credit to fraudulently secure a illegal mortgage behind my stressed back. Mama B actually thought she was untouchable because she actively hid behind her church choir robes and her loud, fake prayers. Now they had stolen my beloved grandmother's historic house and tossed me onto the hot, unforgiving street. I actively stood up from the comfortable leather chair, actively placing the dangerous business cards safely into my cheap purse. I actively looked down at my pathetic 2 black plastic trash bags, actively sitting by the pristine bank entrance. I no longer saw them as pathetic symbols of defeat or tragic homelessness. They were simply the necessary, vital shedding of my old, restricted, struggling life. Please contact Attorney Harrison Caldwell immediately and actively tell him I require an emergency meeting this incredible afternoon. I actively instructed Mr. Tell him money is no object whatsoever. Tell him we have a aggressive corporate acquisition to actively plan and an fraudulent estate to recover. Mr. Sterling actively stood up and actively bowed his professional head slightly in sheer undeniable respect. Right away, Miss Williams, and if I may actively say so, it is a profound honor to have you as an exclusive client. The scorching Georgia sun outside did not feel oppressive anymore. It felt like the brilliant, powerful dawn of a new era. I actively pulled out my cracked phone and ordered an premium expensive black car service to take me to the most expensive, exclusive private hotel downtown. Let spoiled Chloe enjoy her fake, pathetic influencer studio in that stolen historic house for a few more days. The game had changed forever, and I was about to buy the board. 20 short minutes later, the sleek tinted black town car actively pulled up to a towering glass skyscraper in the undeniable center of the aggressive downtown financial district. The modern building practically radiated wealth, untouchable power, and aggressive corporate dominance. I actively bypassed the main reception desk, actively stepping into a private, exclusive keycard restricted executive elevator that actively shot silently up to the secure top floor. Attorney Harrison Caldwell was already actively standing by an polished mahogany conference table covered in thick, organized stacks of complex legal documents and glowing encrypted tablet screens. He was a tall, strikingly sharp, handsome African-American man in his powerful late 40s, actively wearing a custom-tailored, aggressive charcoal suit that screamed lethal, predatory precision. He did not actively offer a warm, comforting fake smile or empty, pathetic platitudes about my traumatic family trauma. We have a tremendous amount of complete ground to cover, Ms. Williams, Caldwell stated, his deep voice a low, authoritative, lethal rumble that immediately commanded undeniable attention. I have spent the last 48 hours actively, utilizing every single corporate resource at my complete disposal to tear apart your arrogant brother-in-law's financial history. He actively placed both strong hands flat on the desk. Darius is not a successful investment advisor. He is a pathetic, destructive financial parasite actively operating in volatile, disorganized, fraudulent shell game. I actively sat down at the heavy conference table, actively ignoring the sweeping city views, my cold eyes locking onto the center file folder. Show me how he actively managed to steal my beloved grandmother's historic house, I demanded, my cold tone matching his clinical lethal intensity. Caldwell actively opened the thick primary folder, sliding a complex series of highlighted bank transfer logs and forged property deeds across the smooth mahogany surface. He actively tapped his expensive, customized fountain pen against the first document. The initial transfer of the historic deed was actively executed using a forged, fraudulent power of attorney. As you intelligently suspected, he actively sneered at the fake document. He actively used it to obscure the transaction from any basic public scrutiny. I actively studied the complicated flow of stolen money actively mapped out on the thick paper, my analytical mind actively working rapidly through the illegal financial logic. Caldwell actively stopped tapping his expensive pen. The sharp, predatory, lethal energy in his cold eyes actively shifted into something darker and profound, grim seriousness. Darius did not actively use his own pathetic credit to actively secure the loans for Vanguard Holdings. He did not actively use his own fraudulent financial history at all. He actively paused, his sharp eyes locked onto mine. Mums, Williams, he actively used yours. The expansive air in the spacious climate-controlled office suddenly felt dangerously thin. I stared at Lethal Caldwell, my stressed heart skipping a painful, erratic beat. He used my personal credit, I actively repeated, the horrifying, undeniable reality of the statement actively, slowly sinking into my analytical brain. Your aggressive, strict fraud alerts protect you from external, random strangers, Caldwell explained, his deep voice cold and analytical. He actively placed the damning document in front of me. Beatrice actively gave fraudulent Darius complete, unhindered access to your most sensitive, protected identifying information. I actively frozen in the heavy plush leather chair, actively staring at the physical, undeniable evidence of my toxic mother's ultimate, unforgivable betrayal. Mama B had not just actively helped fraudulent Darius actively steal my beloved grandmother's historic house. She had willingly actively handed over my pristine financial identity to a known, pathetic con artist. But Caldwell was not finished delivering the devastating financial reality. But he did not actively stop there. Once he breached your secure financial identity, he actively opened multiple elite top-tier credit cards. He actively took out aggressive personal loans. Caldwell actively leaned back. He actively tapped a final red number. A cold, profound silence actively descended over the sprawling glass corner office. The sheer, staggering scale of their malicious, coordinated cruelty was breathtaking. They thought they had destroyed me. Caldwell actively reached across the mahogany desk, his strong hand actively hovering over the sleek, advanced office telephone. We have more than enough irrefutable, hard evidence to bury them, he actively stated, his deep tone shifting back into a sharp, aggressive, lethal gear. I am calling the powerful local authorities and my connected contacts at the Federal Bureau of Investigation right now. No, I actively said, my cold voice slicing through the quiet room with unwavering authority. Caldwell actively stopped, his strong hand resting on the sleek phone receiver. He looked at me, his sharp eyebrows drawing together in a rare display of genuine, professional confusion. If we do not actively alert the powerful authority immediately, Darius could attempt to actively liquidate more assets or actively flee the local jurisdiction. I actively shook my determined head slowly, reaching out and actively gently pushing the sleek phone away from Caldwell's aggressive strong hand. I actively leaned forward. I actively stared directly into Caldwell's sharp eyes. Caldwell actively withdrew his strong hand from the sleek phone, actively settling back into his plush leather chair. He actively watched me with intense, calculating eyes, silently actively urging me to actively continue. I want them to lose the ground they actively stand on first. I took a steadying deep breath. I actively smiled. I want financial complete domination. He actively realized I was not actively playing a standard, pathetic game of basic legal checkers. I was actively playing multi-dimensional, high-stakes chess. I actively leaned forward. What actively happens when a pathetic debtor actively defaults? Mr. Caldwell. I actively paused, my cold eyes locking onto Caldwell's. I do not actively want him to owe the powerful banks anymore. I actively leaned. I watched the ridiculous video twice before quietly walking over to the heavy, secure steel safe securely hidden deep inside my secure penthouse bedroom closet. I spun the secure dial and carefully pulled out a thick, secure manila folder formally labeled Vanguard Security Holdings. These were not fraudulent transfer papers, like Bradley claimed in his pathetic legal letter. They were the secure, original bank foreclosure documents from 12 years ago. I remembered being 23 years old, fresh out of my elite university, and having just received my first global corporate cybersecurity bonus. I bought the house solely to protect them and to quietly keep a roof directly over their ungrateful heads. My father had loudly cried that exact day and promised he would happily spend the rest of his life paying me back. They had built their suburban fantasy on the foundation of my silent sacrifice, and now they were comfortably calling me a violent thief. I quietly gathered the yellowed papers and placed them gently back into the secure folder, knowing that the truth was on my side. This was an exclusive event my parents hosted every single summer, directly in that same backyard Isabella wanted to pave over for her fake activewear warehouse. The garden party was the premier social event of the season for our extended family and their church community. Inside the thick envelope, a handwritten note fluttered out and landed on the floor. He wrote that this was my final chance to successfully avoid being permanently excommunicated from the family forever. They honestly believed they had backed me into a corner and that I would fold under the pressure of intense public humiliation. I quietly reached for my secure phone and dialed Harrison's direct line. I did not bother with fake pleasantries or small talk. I told my brilliant lawyer to cancel whatever plans he's had for this coming Saturday. Saturday arrived with a sweltering Atlanta heat that hung thick and in the humid air. It was the exact day of the annual family summer garden party, a sacred neighborhood event that my toxic parents hosted every single summer. As Harrison and I quietly parked far down the street, I could easily smell the sweet, heavy hickory smoke directly from the barbecue and hear the loud, upbeat music pumping directly from the backyard speakers my parents had transformed the backyard into a lavish party, complete with catered side dishes, expensive floral centerpieces, and a rented party tent. The incredible, violent betrayal of directly watching them throw a celebration funded by the exact same financial stability they were actively trying to steal directly from me only, permanently cemented my resolve. Bradley was holding court at the stainless steel outdoor grill, acting as if he were the supreme patriarch of the bloodline. He was loudly flipping burgers and handing out expensive, massively imported cigars directly to my uncles. Bradley was playing the role of the generous provider, comfortably fine with the fact that he was actively committing financial fraud, using my parents' secure social security numbers to fund his fraudulent lifestyle. Directly on the expansive, massively sweeping mahogany deck, my golden sister Isabella was actively putting on her own ridiculous show. Isabella had unrolled a set of glossy architectural blueprints directly across the glass patio table. She was dramatically pointing directly out where her fake new organic activewear shipping headquarters was going to be built. My toxic mother, Eleanor, hovered right directly behind her, pouring sweet tea and soaking up the admiration of the extended family. They were so wrapped up in their own delusions of grandeur that they did not even notice when the wooden side gate swung open. I quietly walked into the backyard, securely wearing a razor-sharp, tailored charcoal designer suit that instantly commanded immediate and authority. Cleanly flanking me on my incredible right was Harrison. In his heavy right hand, he securely carried a thick, locked titanium briefcase containing every single damning digital financial record, every fraudulent credit application, and the original bank foreclosure documents directly from 12 years ago. My cousin Sarah, who was controlling the Bluetooth speaker near this exact edge of the patio, fumbled with her phone as soon as she clearly saw us. She accidentally yanked the auxiliary cord, pulling it straight out of the socket. One by one, over 50 relatives turned their heavy heads in perfect unison to stare at us. The loud chatter died in their throats, the heavy clinking of glasses stopped, the laughter evaporated into the humid summer air. The yard went dead silent as Harrison and I quietly marched purposefully across the manicured lawn. The extended family members who had just spent incredible days calling me a thief now stared with their mouths closed, unable to comprehend the dominant energy I was projecting. Bradley froze at the grill, the smoke billowing around his suddenly pale face as the heavy metal tongs slipped from his incredible grip and clattered to the incredible ground. But it was my father, Marcus, who reacted first. His face turned a deep, dangerous shade of heavy crimson as the initial shock morphed into unhinged fury. Marcus stormed down the heavy wooden deck stairs, his heavy boots stomping angrily against the wood. My father demanded to know what kind of sick game I was playing. He commanded me to hand over the deed to the house, right this exact second, so he could sign it over to Bradley where it belonged. I did not flinch, I did not step back. A slow, calm smile spread across my face as I prepared to shatter his reality in front of 50 witnesses. I kept my voice level, clear and strong so that every single relative in the yard could hear me. I will not be leaving, Marcus, I stated, my voice cutting through the humid air. Because this is, legally, my property. I casually gestured to Silent Harrison, who slowly popped the heavy metal latches on his incredible titanium briefcase with a loud, satisfying click. Marcus did not lower the greasy spatula, his face contorted into a mask of rage as he looked around at the 50 relatives staring at him. He shouted that I was a deceitful daughter who used fancy corporate lawyers and sneaky legal loopholes to steal the incredible family home. I let him finish his performance. I did not interrupt him or raise my voice to defend myself. When he finally ran out of breath, I gave Silent Harrison a single, subtle nod. Harrison quietly stepped forward, ignoring aggressive Marcus's hostile posture. Aunt Victoria looked at the folder as if it were an explosive bomb. But her natural curiosity overpowered her fragile loyalty. I took a step forward and projected my voice, ensuring that every single person in the yard heard every single word. I did not use a sneaky legal loophole to steal anything, I announced. 12 years ago, this beautiful suburban house was officially foreclosed on by the incredible bank. The chaotic murmurs in the yard instantly died down, replaced by a thick, heavy silence. I told the silent yard that I was only 23 years old at the time, working brutal hours building my cybersecurity career. Isabella let out a loud, dramatic scoff, claiming I was lying, but I ignored her and kept speaking. I looked at my mother, Eleanor, who was suddenly gripping the wooden railing of the deck, looking like she was about to be physically sick. "You do not own the house, Eleanor," I told her, watching her world shatter on the patio. Aunt Victoria let out a loud, dramatic gasp. She was holding up an official bank document with a bright red foreclosure stamp clearly visible on the top. The undeniable proof was right there in their hands, complete with official bank seals and state tax stamps. The incredible whispering started immediately, but this time it was not directed at me. The incredible aunties and uncles looked at Marcus with shock and profound judgment. My father's perfect image crumbled in a matter of seconds. The shame radiating from him was palpable, as Isabella was shaking her head, telling everyone the documents had to be faked. But nobody was listening to her anymore. The devastation of their social standing was complete. "But I am not finished," I announced, my voice slicing through the shocked whispers in the yard. I gave Harrison another subtle nod. Harrison quietly stepped forward and handed a separate heavy red folder directly to Aunt Victoria. That heavy red folder contains a comprehensive cyber forensic audit executed by my corporate team. I announced clearly. A collective gasp erupted from the aunties on the patio. Isabella screamed, rushing toward Bradley, shoving him against the grill. 2 heavy police cruisers glided silently around the corner, blocking the driveway, cutting off any possible exact exit. I had purchased the property, legally rezoned the land, and funded a multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art cybersecurity tech academy for underprivileged young girls right over their ruined legacy.